Hey there, in this tutorial I'm going to be going over data types in C. I'm going to talk about how to store data and also how to read data and display them in your application or in your program. And I'm creating this tutorial for those people who downloaded my personalized finance app programming guide. If you haven't downloaded it, it's in the link in the description. Alright, let's get started. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, I have a video on how to download it and how to start coding with it. So you can watch that video. I'll put it in the link in the description. Alright, so I just navigated to my folder. There's nothing inside. All I did was I opened it using this open, just go to the folder. So let's create a file, a C file. And then I'm going to do #include stdio.h. So this is a standard input-output library. And basically I'm just telling the compiler that I want to use this library. And then we create our main function. And then I'm going to do a simple print. So if you don't know how to print, here's a basic string you can print. Everyone prints this string as their first string. And then in main is a function. You have to do a return 0. You have to do a return 0 because the function type is int. And you don't have to worry about that too much right now, but this is just the basic structure to get started for C. And then let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so you can see it says hello world. That's just this string. All right, let's talk a little bit about data types. So data types are just a way for you to tell your program what kind of data it's interacting with. So let's start with an example. The first one I want to introduce you to is int. And int is just an integer data type. Int is usually used for a type of data that is countable. For example, if you want the number of dogs or the number of cats, then you would use the int data type. So for example, we can do num dogs, or we can do number of dogs to make it easier to read, number of dogs. And then, so this is a declaration of the data type. And then we can say how many dogs there are. They say there are 5 dogs, right? And instead of printing hello world, we print the number of dogs. So we say the number of dogs is, and then we use %d to tell the program that we want them to print an int. And then we'll put what int that is here. So we'll say number of dogs. All right, so we run this. It says the number of dogs is 5. All right, and say we also had number of cats. That's another variable that we're declaring here. So now there's 2 variables. There's the number of dogs and then the number of cats. So number of cats, and let's say there are 3 cats. So if we replace this number of dogs with number of cats, instead of 5, we will get 3 because number of cats, the number is 3. Oh, I forgot to change the message here. So instead of saying let's say the number of cats, run it. So the number of cats is 3. All right, makes sense so far? All right, let's also print the number of dogs. So the number of dogs, and then run that. Okay, the number of dogs is 5 and number of cats is 3. And then we can do something like, let's say we want to create another int called number of animals. And then we say the number of animals is equal to the number of dogs plus the number of cats. And then say we want to print also the number of animals. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so the number of dogs is 5, the number of cats is 3, the number of animals is 8. Now say you want to ask the user how many dogs there are. So here we're telling the program it's 5. But say we don't want to tell the program what the number is inside the code. We want the user who's going to use the program to input the number of dogs. So this is when we use scanf. And scanf is what we use to read the user input. Okay, we use %d because we want to tell the program that we're going to ask the user to input an integer. And then we specify what that integer is by using the name of the integer that we are going to store into. So we use number of dogs here, okay? And let's remove this because we don't want it to be 5 all the time. We want it to come from the user. All right, so we have here a printf statement asking the user to input the number of dogs. And then we ask the user, what is the input? And then whatever the user puts in, we store it in this variable number of dogs. All right, now if you've been following my tutorials on, my first coding tutorial on Visual Studio Code, when you run this, it's not going to ask you, you're not going to be able to type in the number of dogs. So we have to make a change in the settings of CodeRunner, which is the extension that I had taught you how to install earlier. This CodeRunner. So we need to make a change to the settings for the configuration for that. So to change that, we need to go to here in our settings. And then go to our user settings. Then yeah, we type in CodeRunner here, and then you find this run in terminal option, and we check this one, and that should be it. So now let's try this again. Now it's running inside terminal, and then now it's asking, what is the number of dogs? So now we can do 5, and then press enter, and then there you go. The number of dogs is 5, number of cats is 3, and number of animals is 8. So let's redo that again. Let's use 7. So now it says the number of dogs is 7. Okay. Oh yeah, and also I don't know if I mentioned this, but if you this n is this \n is to indicate that you want the program to output a new line character. So if I put in like 2 more, if I put in 1 more, and I run this again, now it put in another line here. So now, same idea. And actually, I kind of don't like how this is really close to this part. So let's actually put some new line characters above it. Let's put 2. And then let's remove the extra one I had there, and let's run it. All right, so now there's two new line characters there. Now we can do our program. There you go. Or maybe we can be fancy and we can do it like this. And then new line character. Alright, so now we have a divider. But now we have too much space here, so let's remove that. Okay, I removed the new line characters from there. Okay, number of dogs is 8. And there you go. So now the output's looking cleaner. Let's get rid of this so it looks cleaner. Alright, so that's int. So we have 3 ints here. One is for the sum. Maybe we can just call this the sum of animals. And we have the number of dogs, number of cats. Okay, so that's the int variable. Now let's say we want to add a decimal variable. We want to use a decimal. So in C we use float, or we can also use double, but I'm going to use float as an example. And since you'll be using my personalized finance app programming guide to program, let's just say it's a money variable. So we'll create a money variable called my money, and then let's say I have a decimal amount of money, like $5.12. Now we should print how much money we have. And then instead of using %d, we use %g. And then we'll just use my money here. All right, so now it says I have this amount. Let's also put the $sign so it shows it as money. Okay, so now it says I have $5.12. So we use float for decimals, and a decimal is just a number that has a decimal in it. You can actually, it doesn't have to be 2 decimal places, we can actually add more. But in this context, that doesn't make sense because money, we don't have money has 4 decimal places, it's always 2 decimal places. But just for an example, I made it like that. All right, let's remove those extra decimals. And then say we want to ask how much money do you have? So after we ask the number of dogs, let's do something similar where we ask how much money do you have? And then we're going to use my money here. And then instead of %d, we use %g. And this is, we're telling the program that this data type that we're storing in my money is, we want it to be a float. Okay, let's run this. Okay, I have 7 dogs. How much money do you have? Let's say I have $20 and 55 cents. All right, so now it says I have this amount. Okay, now we can get rid of this because we're not hard coding that number in there. We're asking the user how much money do they have. Okay, so float is for decimals. We can also use double. And double is good because double is what we usually use for calculations. Yeah, double is more accurate and it'll also help reduce errors. So if you're gonna make calculations in your program, use double instead. But if we're gonna use double, we have to change the way that we're reading the variable from the user. So you add L here. So you use %lg to read in that variable from the user, and likewise when we print we have to use lg. All right, so let's run this. So number of dogs 7. How much money do you have? $55.64. Okay, so it still does the same thing, but we want to use double because it's more accurate than float. Float is a smaller data type and you don't have to worry about that right now. But basically float is a smaller data type, so double is double the size of the float data type, so it's more accurate. All right, now I want to introduce you to a data type called char. And the char is just a character. Say we want to ask the user the first letter of their name. And then let's set first letter to the first letter of the alphabet. A. Now, if we want to print the letter, the first letter is, and then we use %c because we're telling the program that we want to print a char variable, and the char variable is called first letter. Okay. Number of dogs. Forgot to put in the new line character. All right, so now it says the first letter is A. All right, say we want to ask the user the first letter of their name. So let's ask the user, what is the first letter of your name? Okay, instead of making first letter to be A all the time, let's remove that. And then we're gonna use scanf again. Scanf. And then we have to put a space here and then do a %c. We have to specify the char variable here. First letter. When there's red lines underneath in some place in your code, that means there's an error there. And then it will, if you hover over in your IDE, it will tell you it was expecting a semicolon, and it's because we forgot to put a semicolon over here. So when you put a semicolon there, the IDE will know, oh, he fixed it. So it removes the red lines underneath. All right, so let's try running it now. What was the first letter of your name? H. So the first letter is H. Alright, the last data type I'm going to teach you in this video is string. So in C we don't have string. A string is just a char array. So let's actually make instead of doing first letter, let's just say first name, and then we have to create an array. I'll just put 6 for now so you understand. And the reason it's 6 is because I have 6 letters in my name. And these 2 lines, it just means it's commenting. I'm commenting this out so the compiler doesn't actually do anything with this thing that I just typed. So there's 6 letters, and actually I think I need 7, because we also want to take into account, we also have an end of string character that looks like this. So we have H is the first letter, we have E, N, R, I, K, and then this counts as one char in this array. So to make it more clear, it looks like this. That's why we have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, so if you try to do this and see, it's not gonna work because this is an array, and you can't assign an array like this. You have to use a function called string copy, str copy. And this is one of the reasons why people don't really like C, because it's kind of complicated, but I think it really helps you out in the long run in terms of understanding how programs and how the computers work. So this is how we're going to assign first name, or how we're going to store our name in there, or my name in there. Okay, now let's just say here, and instead of %C we use %S. Okay, I forgot to include the header string.h because we're using a function called strcopy. So we need to include the library for that. So in order to use strcopy or string copy, we need to include string.h. I keep forgetting that. Okay, so now it says your name is Henrik. Alright, say we want to ask the user, instead of doing this and putting in my name right there, we want to ask the user what their name is. So let's remove this, and then we type in here, what is your name? Okay, now we do scanf, then we use %s, and then we put in first name. And we don't have to put in ampersand here. That's because first name is an array. See, it's an array. So it's just going to use the address. And that's all. You don't have to really worry about the specifics for now. Just know that for arrays, for a char array or a string, you should just use the name. You just use the name of the variable. But for like int and for double, you need to have an ampersand there. Okay. Okay, let's try it. Number of dogs, 6, and then $5.14, and Henrik. Okay. All right. Something to note is the first name array is only 7 characters long, but your program's gonna complain, or it's not gonna be designed well if you have a longer name than 7. Like if you have a name like Charles, it's not going to work well with your program's not going to work well, and that's because your array is only allocated, or there's only enough memory for a 7-character name. So usually you can just use a larger number just to make sure we can make it 10, and 10 should be okay. Most names are not longer than 10 characters, so you just use 10. So that's how you do strings. I'll show you one last way you can do string, and instead of using scanf, you can use something called fgetS. And fgetS is another function that you can use. and then you put the first thing you put in there is the string. So first name, do size of, and then do size of first name, and then you specify where is the input coming from. You say stdin. stdin stands for standard input. Alright, so now there's a problem here. It says your name is blank. That's because when you use fgetS like this, it's storing even the new line characters that you're putting in your standard input. So when you press enter here, how much money do you have? You press enter. That enter is used and stored in first name. That's why your name is just looks like it's blank, because there's a new line character that's stored inside first name. So let's remove this scanf, and then let's run this again. Let's put another fgetS, and then let's run this. Okay, so now it works. Yeah, fgetS can be a little tricky. It can be hard to get used to if you're new to programming. So this one is reading in a new line character that you entered after you input the amount of money you had. When you enter in 514, that number gets stored into my money. And then you pressed enter. And then when it says what is your name, the enter is still in the input stream, and that when fgetS is called here, it's going to store that enter that new line character that enter that you put in. It's going to read in that enter and store it into your first name variable. So you have to do a second one to get the actual name that the user is going to put in. And this can cause a lot of headaches if you're just new to programming, but I think the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. Just to elaborate on this, say we didn't have these scanfs in the beginning, and we just removed them, and we ask right away, what is your name? That way, when the user inputs their name, there's no character in the input stream already. There's not character in the input stream yet. So in that case, we don't need two, we just need one. Alright, now if we run this, the program is only going to ask for the name. What is your name? And there's nothing in the input stream yet. So this will just take in what you entered. Okay, so now I just took in Henrik. That's why we only have to do it once. Make sense? Okay, I'm gonna put everything back, and then I'm gonna commit this to GitHub so that you can play with it on your own. Alright, so I put my file in the repository so that you can play with it. I'll leave the link in the description. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, leave a comment. And I hope this really helps you out. Peace.